At this point, several pages in Tomas's manuscript were torn out. He might have considered it advisable to tear them out, or else an alien hand, having read them, might have had the indiscretion to find them interesting enough as to appropriate them for safekeeping in that manner. Whatever the case, we regret we are not in a position to give the reader an account of those missing pages, yet we shall continue with the story as it stands. That he had seen him at home, what else was he to repay? On the other hand, my mind had been made up long before I was in possession of that piece of news. Old Terente droned away that I ought to settle in the village, for they would have me as their parishioner. They would get a license from their bishop and ordain me, never fear. The revolution had come to an end, and nothing stood in the way of my becoming a priest, but for my nature that would not bear the side of the cloth. Before the long peace was declared, though we sentries of the Carpathians had not dispersed yet, one day Terente gave me a pail and asked me to fetch water from a well near by. The day was warm and sunny, and the forest green with new leafage. An itching wanderlust seized my soul. I reached the well, stood staring at the water at its bottom for some time, then dropped the pail inside and took the path toward the distant mountains. Most of our village was burnt and deserted. Only the dogs were in the alleys, baying with hunger or gnawing at the carcass of a cow. I entered the hut. I threw myself into the arms of my aged father, who had taken me for dead. Reunited father and son, we hugged each other for a long time. Father's eyes were brimful with tears. No words would come to him, so he only kept stroking my hair and brow, kissing me and shedding tears of joy. I told him all that I could remember for a whole day and night, yet he would hear more. I inquired about his doings during the rebellion, and with a sly smile he pointed to an old lance hung on a hook. I dare say I've done my bit according to my powers. Not much juice left in these old bones, I'm afraid, he said cheerfully. Oh, that I'd been your age, but I'm old, and that's that. And this happy gaze took me in from head to foot, as if to make sure that I was not an apparition. By and by Finitza came around. She was engaged to be married to a tall, handsome lad. I inquired about the wedding date, and she blushed crimson up to the tips of her ears. Yet I could see that she could hardly wait. The country was at peace. Finitza got married, and I gave her away. In fine, I stayed home doing nothing until one day I found myself fatherless. He had fallen asleep with old age, to sleep forever. I laid him in his grave beside mother's, and put up a wooden cross hung with a wreath of basil at the head. Poor Finitza, wiping her tears with her apron, gave me her word she would lay flowers on their graves, light a candle now and then, on a holy day, into their memory, unto their memory. Despondency was gnawing at my heart, despondency and solitude. Poesis. I repaired to Cluj. I waited for the nightfall to sneak to her house and see what had become of her. I had a mind to forget and forgive her betrayal, and if I could light the one spark of love left in her bosom, to take her with me and make her my wedded wife. My heart was yearning for love, and like a drowning man I was eager to grasp at a straw. The night was rainy with black clouds flying across the sky, and occasional snatches of moonlight sifting down in their deep rifts. I took a small lantern with me, and paced the streets under the humming patter of the drizzle, and without the town I walked on across the oozy fields with yellow runnels crisscrossing the green grass, my feet treading the ripples which flooded the plain. It was pitch dark, and I could hardly see beyond arm's length. I stopped at the front door of her house, took out the lantern, and lit it, but when I nerved myself to knock, I noticed the lock had been sealed by the authorities. What could have happened? Hi. Like all women addicted to a life of vice, she must have fallen in debt, and now they intended to auction her only property, the little house. I was past caring. I must needs enter the house to recall the only moments of happiness in my life. I tore off the seal on the lock, and then broke the lock itself. I entered the house and her room. All the furniture was where it had stood on the first day I fell in love. The lid on the piano was drawn up, the chair was still at the keyboard. The old man, straight back, stood facing the hearth. Her tidy white bed was alongside the left wall. I set the lamp on the table, and my glance fell on an epistle sealed with a black wax. I picked it up. It was addressed to me in her neat hand. I tore it open and read it. The handwriting was trembling and the ink was smeared, with tears of dripped onto the sheet. I shall reproduce it word for word. My love, my own sweet love, you took me for a traitress, for an abandoned woman, and went into the wide world. I, my sweetheart, I was a criminal, as Mary Magdalene was a criminal. Toma, I shall not ask you to love me again. When you read these lines, there'll he not to love but the buried skull and the sightless orbs of a mad girl, mad with love for you and destroyed by the love that nature had urged on her, the love for her aged father. Father was ailing, and I could not turn an honest penny. What was I to do? The thought of begging made me blush, so I told myself. So I sold myself. And I made a great deal of money, far too much for the good it did me, for father died. Shall I describe my feelings after I buried him? Time and again I contemplated going to you and throwing my arms about your feet, to beg you, to beseech your forgiveness. I would have fain to become your slave, for I loved you. Nay, I love you still. I went to Yon. I entreated him to look after you, and gave him all the money I had, but I pledged him to swear that he would not as much utter my name within your hearing. Before leaving, he came here and apprised me of your predicament, and I sent him back to you, for I knew what your first thought would be, suicide. And I also knew your love was no less ardent than mine. One day you vanished. What good was the sacrifice to me now with father dead, with you away? I wrote my will and bequeathed to you this little house. Then I started a fire in the hearth, locked the door, and shuttered the window, for the idea was luring of dying your kind of death. In that stifling air, I committed to paper the lines now before your eyes. Then I sat at the piano and played again the soothing sweet waltz I had once played with your black-haired, genius-inspired head resting my lap. To caress that marble brow once more was hoping against hope. Yet I do hope for your forgiveness. If the world had been made of only you and I, how we would have loved each other then. We would have roamed about the green forest until we died in each other's arms, only to become two angels in the next world, and keep on roaming among the stars in heaven. Farewell, my boy. I love you. Remember me, if I can. I will think of you only. Do not spurn me, my boy. Let me be yours, Poesis. I read her letter over and over again, pressing the tear-stained lines to my burning bluish lips in an uncontrollable fit of sobbing. Poesis, I kept calling and hugging the air of the room to my heart. Poesis, forgive me. I subsided in the armchair by the piano, wherein she had passed away, and strummed the keys that had been so submissive under her tender, dainty fingers, and my pain grew sweeter from sheer desperation and melancholy. Perhaps her innocent soul was hovering gently about my brow. Perhaps her ethereal entity was stroking my hair and kissing my forehead. I paced the room, haunted by sweet and bitter thoughts in turn. Finally, I took off my clothes and went to sleep in her white bed. I dreamed she was lying by my side, her sweet blonde head on my chest, my burning lips on her snowy brow, wooing a shadow, hugging the darkness, making love to the air, wooing a shadow. My nails kept clutching at the infamous pillow until sleep took pity on me and benumbed my weary mind. I could have stayed in her little house, which was now mine. I could have idled my whole life away, rereading her tear-stained epistle in a sweet madness. I could have dreamed, a lifelong dream, of her walking about my home, smiling at the flowers at the window, watching, while darning or knitting over my baby. I could have invented a make-believe happiness, a make-believe family, an ideal woman. I could have gone mad, but to what end? Besides, however long-lasting that madness, the time is bound to come when one goes through spells of awakening wherein one's uppermost thought is suicide, spells of weariness, skepticism, disappointment. Therefore, I went out into the wide world. That epistle epitomized all the history of my life. Translated by Yon Georgia. Edited by A.K. Prokop. Okay, before I start reading Caesara, I'm going to see how much is left of this. Okay, no. Okay, well, it looks like Sisara is the last story of this. Sisara. A summer morning, the sea spread out its boundless blue beneath the sun rising languidly in the limpid azure depths of the sky. The flowers were rearing their heads refreshed after the night's restful slumber. The rocks were exhaling their sable dewy steam, and turning hoary and here and there enervated by the heat. Grains of sand and fragments of stone tumbled lazily into the water. An ancient monastery surrounded by citadel-like walls stood among the crags in the west of the green crowns of a clump of poplars, and chestnuts rose behind the walls. The mouldy tiles on the pointed roofs, the blackened dome of the church, the decaying walls invaded by a horde of lush weeds, by ants settling up their kingdoms in long procession of red insects, baking in the sun with voluptuous laziness, the stone steps, well worn and corroded by many a footstep, all combined would have made the spectator think it was a ruin preserved as an old curiosity rather than a dwelling place. To the right side of the monastery rose hills carpeted with woods, gardens, and vineyards, and hamlets, with whitewashed houses, were scattered along their narrow valley. To the left ribbon of a road twisted and wound amid a vast expanse of cornfields stretching as far as the eye could reach. Facing it was the sea with its water table broken by an occasional cliff rearing its head out of the depths. Of this way. Footpaths littered with molehills ran along the hillside up to the surrounding walls. An old monk is walking along a path leading to the monastery gate with his hands locked at his back. He is wearing a sackcloth surplice gathered with a white band round his waist. His woolen rosary dangles out of his bosom. His wooden sandals shuffle and clank at every step he takes forward. His beard is rather scent-haired, his watery eyes inexpressive and rather idiotic, no mark of resignation or austerity about him. Outside the gate he pulls the cord. A monk lets him in. He steps into the seemingly deserted courtyard, paved with square flagstones, overgrown with blades of tall grasses, and the pond in its center, whose sides are wilderness of weeds every description. Tall burdocks, mulleins, melitots, and vetches entwined their flowery network over the whole vegetation, stifling it amid the tangle of their stalks. The old man walks toward a shadowy, long, and multi-pillared veranda with a flight of stairs leading to the courtyard. He opens the door and disappears inside the building. In the long, high walls of the monastery there are windows encased in black bars like the windows of disused cells. One only is enmeshed with ivy, and a few potted roses wriggle their heads through that net of shady foliage into the sunlight. The window opened into a cell, the walls of which were daubed with all manner of strange sketches, all of them in pencil. A saint here, a puppy gambling in the grass there, in another corner the exquisitely drawn icon of a gypsy girl, flowers, bushes, female heads, bonnet slippers, and a fine sketchbook scattered all over the wall. A case of religious books, a straight-backed chair, a few surplices hung on a hook, a chest painted with flowers of every description, an unpretentious bedstead under which a pair of slipper and black tomcat showed up their noses. That was all the furniture. The sunlight creeping into the cell through the trembling live net at the window pierced the semi-darkness, and thousands of moving specks were disporting themselves in its rays, vanishing from sight along with them. A youthful monk is sitting on the chair. He is indulging in a moment of snug idleness, such as a hound is wont to enjoy when basking in the sun, lazy, sleepy, and happy-go-lucky. A flawless wide brow, framed with glossy black hair, rises above his sunken eyes and finely built nose. A thin-lipped mouth, a well-rounded chin, eyes self-satisfied as it were, gazing with a self-consciousness which might become daring. A singular blend of dreaminess and dispassionate reasoning in their look. He went to the window, and cast a glance at the garden below, overgrown with soft herbs sheltered in the virginal shade of the trees, at the oranges barely showing through the leafage, then penciled an orange on the wall. He picked up a slipper, put it on the table, scanned it, then opened a religious book, and penciled the slipper in a corner of a page. What a desecration of a sacred books! All their margins were scrawled with profiles of women, priests, knights, beggars, histrions. In short, life as he saw it, daubed in every available corner. Presently the old man entered. "Bless me, father. God be with you. I say, Yeronim," continued the merry old man in a bantering voice, "were you working on, you naughty boy?" "Me working? But when on earth did I work? The mere presumption is a smear on my good character, father. Do you call this work? I only enjoy myself drawing all kinds of things on these walls. Work indeed. I'm wiser than I look. You do wrong that you won't study painting. I do neither wrong nor right, for I do nothing. It's only a pastime. You're withering away your talent, my son. Withering away your talent. Withering away the devil, father. A page, Satanas!" exclaimed the old man, hopping on one leg and falling on his neck. Leronium, Eronium, Eronim, Yeronim, Yeronim, burst out laughing. "God only knows where so much mirth comes from, father. I do have my spells of sadness, but you, not you. Me sad, Yeronim? May the devil take me, my son, if I've ever been sad. Sadness will keep clear of me as my friend the devil of the holy incense. But let it drop. Come to town with me. I met your abbot today, and pulled a long face, this long, and asked him for your assistance in collecting some money for a funeral. I lied as ever yet, Yeronim. We are going to paint the town red. There's a good wine in a pub. I know you'll smack your lip over it, and ask for more. We'll play cards with our pious brethren, puff away at pipes longer than your arm, and glut our eyes on the damsels passing by the windows. But mind you, we'll stop short of course, short of, I wonder who the devil made a monk of you, Yeronim, you heathen, as I wonder who the devil made a monk of you, father. Whoever but the devil. It would be deceitful to take the monk's levities at face value. Their apparent sacrileges were no worse than childish pranks for all the licentiousness of their words. An occasional glass of wine, a game of cards, a pipe of tobacco, a furtive glance at the profile of a smiling girl, that was the sum total of their famous debaucheries. All the charm lay in the mock aura of mystery with which they flavored their sins against the properties. Yeronim struggled into a surplice, put on a sinister mien to match the funny old man's distraught one, both for the benefit of the dismayed gatekeeper, and they hurried out of the monastery and did not slacken their pace before they were on the high road leading toward the city. 2. Countess, I have means to persuade your father to make you mine. No doubt you can do it, and no doubt you will advantage of your position. My father is indebted to you, and you will have his daughter to cancel his debt. It is only natural. The twain of you will agree on a price in your own gentlemanly way. Yet until I become your woman, it is within my rights to beg you to leave me alone. Thenceforth you will have plenty of time to impose your presence on me." The beautiful woman turned her back on him, and gazed out of the window onto the street. She burst out laughing on seeing a funny old man endeavoring to put on pious faces in order to cut a good figure with the passers-by. Yeronim and Onofre were standing in the street, counting their beads in their hands, resting on their bellies, the former's face recollected in deep and noble gravity. The Marquis Castlemare glowed fiercely at the girl who dared spurn his love, then strutted out and slammed the door. "What a good-looking monk," the Countess whispered with a smile, "and that funny old man, like a piazzo in a villain's role. What noble lineaments on the youth's face, like a demon, handsome, grave, indifferent, the very model Francesco seeks for his demon in The Fall of the Angels. If only we could cozen him into sitting for it. Maestro," she called out at the top of her voice, and drew 2 chairs to the window. An elderly man in a velvet overall entered. He was wide-browed, grey-bearded, with serene of countenance. He walked up to the girl, his lips shaping a question. "Come nearer, sit here, have a look at that young monk." He would make a handsome demon in your fall of the angels, wouldn't he? He would make an equally handsome Adonis in Venus and Adonis, rejoined the painter with a smile. With you, the Venus. Come, come, you're stretching things too far. You're green behind the ears, he whispered. Wherefore not? You need love, all your heartstrings quiver at the very word. Will you sooner yield to a man you do not love, that Castlemare, and be his wife? You know how rich I am, and you also know that I care for you as I would love my own daughter, if I had one. And you are well aware that your impoverished rake and gambler of a father would gladly sell you to the highest bidder fleeing his home. Will you have a father? Here I am, I loved once myself. The taste of that sweet madness has stayed with me since my halcyon days. Your thirst for it. Yet in the teeth of that you would let go of the most handsome model of a painting, an angel of genius, for demons are genius-inspired angels, the one still in heaven being rather silly. Come now, father, will you have me run after him? Shall I do the running? Nay, which means yes, my regards, young lady, said Francesco, and dashed toward the door. She would have stopped him, yet she did not have the heart for it. Not to let him have his way would not do either. She did neither, which was more thoughtful in the case of hand. The painter walked out with a mischievous smile, delighted at the faces his sorrows pulling. On contrariness, vacillation, despair. She could not collect her thoughts. She stood gazing at Hieronyme. How handsome he was! Her heart was pounding in her bosom. She could have smothered him if he had hers. That crazy, she felt. But how beautiful, how exquisitely curved, how lovable she was! The amber white of her face was toned down by a violet blue shade, the transparence of a fine network of veins focusing the ideals of art on the domed brow, and the dark blue eyes, their glitter turned sweeter, darker and more demonic by the shade of the long lashes, her hair blonde like gilt rime, her mouth with a fuller under lip inviting kisses, her fine nose and sweet rounded chin gave her the look of one of Giacomo Palma's women. She was exceeding nobility and beauty as she raised her head in childlike pride, like an Arab thoroughbred, and her tall marble white neck assumed the yearning vigor of an Antinous. She rested her head on the palm of one hand, and gazed at the youthful monk with an indefinable hopeless desire. She considered Francesco's harangue was a mere quip, though she would have liked it to come true. What mysterious joys her heart presumed in that gaze! Oh, she would have liked what, alas, what mortal has ever rendered, what mortal can ever render, nay, which language can boast on having the suitable words to render that ocean of feelings which overcrowded not love itself, but rather the thirst for love. She stands dreaming at the window. Let her dream away. Any analysis of her feelings would be a callous intrusion. 3. Onofre and Hieronyme walked along the streets, taking no notice of the man tailing them. It was the painter. Hieronyme dropped in at the post office, where a letter was awaiting him from an uncle of his, an old hermit. Here it is. My beloved nephew, may the Lord bestow his bountiful mercy on you. I am writing these lines on such a glorious day. My soul is so brimful with its fresh sweetness, with the fragrance of the fields, with the myriad whispers of nature, that I feel inclined to take nature into my counsel, and unbosom all my thoughts and feelings, everything that comes to pass within my soul. My world is a veil, girt all around by unscalable rocks, soaring up like a wall, secluding it from the sea, that no living soul is ever likely to descry this earthly paradise which is now dwelling. There is one entrance, a movable rock covers the mouth of a cave, leading into the island. Otherwise, the world without denied ingress in the cave will take this island for a cluster of barren rocks rising from the sea, which neither vegetation nor life. You ought to see its center. All around are gigantic granite rocks, looking like black sentries, and the deep vale, doubtless below sea level, is carpeted with tufts of flowers, wild vines, and fragrant tall herbs, forever free of the intrusion of the scythe, and this soft blanket of verdure is teeming with a world of wild life. Thousands of honeybees scour the flowers, hovering right to their mouths. Velvety bumblebees and blue butterflies crowd an airy realm beneath the quivering sunlight. The towering rocks narrow my horizon. One patch of sky I own, but what a patch! A dark, clear, transparent azure, dotted with an occasional white cloudless, as if a pail of milk were spilled across the sky. There is a lake in the middle of the vale, into which flow 4 springs that keep pattering and bickering and murmuring and upsetting the pebbles night and day. They suffuse the summery quiet of the vale with eternal music. You can descry their limpid and frolicsome liquid silver, twisting and winding down the distant gravelly sides, thrusting their waters into the grip of the whirlpools, twirling madly therein, then darting forward and subsiding into the lake with a moon of contentment. In the heart of this lake, shaded by a bonanza of reeds, grasses and willows mirroring themselves into its water, stands another island adorned with an orange grove. Amid that grove is the cave I have converted into a home and also pantry. And also apiary. All this islet within the larger island is a flower garden I have planted specially for my bees. I keep myself busy from dawn to dusk. You may remember my apprenticeship with a sculptor in my youth. Thus it comes that I have smoothed out the granite walls of my cave and embossed their surface with ornaments and bas reliefs, in much the same way as you fill your walls with sketches. With the difference that sculpture being naked, so are the figures I have carved. On the wall are Adam and Eve. I endeavored to embody primitive innocence within their forms. Neither is alive to the meaning of love, yet they love each other unconsciously. The forms are virginal and unripe. I chose to render affection rather than passion on their countenances, a quite candid idly, between two unconscious of their beauty or nakedness. They stroll in a long embrace in the shade of a row of trees, and flock of lambs keep romping at their feet. Of a different mould are Venus and Adonis. Venus is all love. She leans her infatuated head on the shoulder of the girlishly handsome youth, who, beautiful and self-enamored, casts surreptitious side glances at the rapturous curves of the doting goddess, for he is too diffident to take an eyeful of her. He plays the role of an artless maid caught off guard by her lover. I take a liking in rendering the aggressive woman. It is man's inborn trait to be aggressive, which is to say nature does no more than repeat itself in each and every copy, whereas its exceptions lie in aggressive women. There is an undefinable gentleness in the way in which a woman is in love, has to overcome her innocence and bashfulness in order to lure a man, sulky for some reason by the courtesans, the women whose experience lies in urging men toward love, but the aggressiveness at the heart of female innocence. With that in mind, I am carving now Aurora and Orion on the whitest of my walls. As you may know, the youthful Aurora abducts Orion from the island of Delos, whereon he has been secreted away by the cruel, virginal, love-smitten Diana. In Orion I render that essential trait of ignorance and pride to be seen on most youthful countenances, and in Aurora the unquenchable and cheerfulness of young maids. How arduous a task to depict aggressiveness on such a face! One thing puzzles me, though. After those hours that in love are called pastoral, there stays with man an overwhelming discouragement and sadness. I take it that at such moments man is more apt to commit suicide and more indifferent to death than at any other time. On the other hand, I gave that chaste youth is harder to seduce than a maid, and that poor Venus must have belabored her brains over Adonis. There is some deep mystery in the reluctance before and the sadness after pleasure, yet I do not grasp it. I go to school, you know where, to my honeybees. I am the opinion that all ideas rippling the surface of men's lives are no better than the folds which a cloak tends to shape of a moving body. They have no share in the movement itself, albeit they rise from it. Firstly, consider the bee's state. What order, craftsmanship, and harmony are in that work? Should they have books, magazines, and universities, you would behold a plethora of scholars puzzling over that order, as if it were a brilliant work of intelligence, though it is not intelligence, but something deeper than arrays all things in their colonies, every summer 2 or 3 flawless insights. Secondly, look at their colonies. Every summer 2 or 3 generations will forsake their native village to set up their own colonies, and what strikes the eye is the absence of the verbiage and augmentation in which men are wont to word the immigration of redundant people. Then take the revolutions. Hardly a year passes by without some revolution against the aristocracy, the Queen's favourites, to say nothing of the social compact, the speeches in parliaments, the controversies on divine right versus natural light, sinis et umbra sumus. But you might retort, Father, you transfer ideas and reasons to nature by analogy with human circumstances. In other words, you envisage the state organizations of beasts and what they have in common to the human ones, and thus level our world to theirs. Far be it from me. The humans themselves lead a life based on instincts, subjective, religious, wicked, and deplorable deeds, sponge on customs and institutions originally founded on nature, purposefully and fittingly adjusted to the narrow mindedness of most men. And that has been going on for a long time. You are born, get married, beget children, and die, and likewise to the beasts, with the only difference that in place of the village lane, wherein the four-legged Don Juans strut to and fro, men have invented the ballroom with dance and music, wherein the monocled young jackanapes can sniff the females at their convenience. Days and years pass like that. You are gulled by or undeceived with the arguments in favor of the excellencies of their world up to the day you die, and no one bothers to inquire any longer after that who may have amassed knowledge, committed scholarly waste paper, or, according to circumstances, sermonized, carry on republican propaganda, and so on and so forth. You might experience occasional spells of lucidity wherein, as if aroused from sleep, roused from sleep, you look around and wonder at realizing you have lived in a rigidly organized state of things, neither being aware of nor having wished it, and can this mind, this puny clog of nonsense, for all its occasional flashes of lucidity, ever have its own say in the troublesome and futile bustle and strife of human history, in the history of that elementary what is it? Could it have any impact? Could it mean anything? Could it leave its stamp on nature, when itself is nothing more than a meagre stamp of that self-same nature, not the ghost of a chance? Thus it comes that in the great migrations of peoples wherein the redundant sons forsook the homeland on behalf of the maternal beehive, we perceive an analogy with the swarming of bees. Search for the truth in the actual facts rather than in the explanations that are provided. All positive doctrines, whether philosophical or of jurisprudence or state policies, are in the long run, as many cleverly contrived pleas of the mind, that advocatus diaboli, forced by will to exonerate everything. That wretched advocate is hired to set all things in favorable light, and as existence is miserable in itself, he will embellish with flowers and a front of wisdom, for the benefit of school and church, both eager to deceive the brats hardly entered into the limelight as to the value of real life. Honor for civil servants, glory for soldiers, glamour for princes, fame for scholars, the heaven for fools. That is how one generation deceives the next one by the agency of his inherited advocatus diaboli, this slave compelled to resort to cunning and sophistry, who in turn will keen as a priest, pull grave faces as a professor, or likewise parley as a barrister, or bewail his wretchedness as a beggar. This one performs his part for a glass of wine, that one for a title, another for money, another for a crown, albeit the driving force within every one is the same, a moment of intoxication. This is what I learned from my masters, the honeybees. My schooling makes me realize that we are will-less shadows, automatons that do more and no less than what they are bid to do, and that so as we should not take a loathing to the game, we are given this handful of brains, which we will have believed we actually do as we wish, the choice being upon to us. It is a self-delusion wherein the multitude of probabilities is taken for what we are compelled to do. History's inner life is instinctive. Its external life, the kings, priests, and scholars, are sheer lustre and verbiage, and as the silk cloth over the corpse will not give away its real state, likewise these mendacious adornments will not allow us an inkling into the sorry plight of history itself. Thanks to nature's guidance, I have cast away the cloth of vanity. I take, if you are still a novice, do not take orders, my son, be sensible, and do not barter your nature for a surplice and a black hat. I have been a hermit, not a monk. I should like someone to take my place in this hermitage, for I am old and my hour of salvation is drawing near. Come hither, but not before I am dead. While I am still alive, you might spare me your presence. I am jealous of my solitude. Old age is a slow extinction. How slowly my heart is beating now, and how recklessly it kept throbbing before I turned threescore. This is the way of all flesh. One day it will beat more and more slowly, then its beats will cease altogether, for the oil in the lamp is burnt out. I know I shall fall asleep, only that I would not wake any more. I kiss your brow, Euthanasius. Francesco noticed Euronymous and Onofre coming out of an old building and struck up a conversation with the youth, asking him a few sittings. He consented, seeing nothing amiss with the elderly maestro, and the three of them directed their steps toward the painter's home. On the way, Father Onofre contrived to touch the painter's hand, found a few gold coins therein, and loath to quit certainty for hope, shook that hand amicably with acquisitive fingers. Remembered some loose ends of business he wanted to clear up, the more so as the pub tables were beckoning to him lovingly, so he muttered some thin excuses and betook himself off. In the meanwhile, the inquisitive and reckless Cisara was rummaging about the painter's studio. She approached the picture, raised the cloth cover, and examined the progress of the work. The fall of the angels. The serenely grave Archangel Michael was stabbing the air with his fiery sword. His blond curls framed his marble-white face and domed brow, and his blue eyes flashed force and energy. His sword arm reached out toward the chaos. His long white wings were hoisted above his shoulders into an ellipse, and a swarm of blue stars studded the semicircle above his brow. The background was chaos, the upper side streaked with an occasional dying star, the lower side dark and cold, but the angel's sword was directed toward a gray stripe left vacant for the figure of the chaste demon. She heard the thud of footsteps across the veranda. There was a screen partitioning it off the artist's bed from the studio. She took cover behind it, sank the bed, and started peeping. Enter Francesco and the young monk. Her heart was thumping savagely against her ribs on the brink of failing her. The artist showed Euronymous the picture and pointed to a cabinet. Cisara sat motionless where she was, keeping a still tongue in her head. Francesco reappeared, looked for his palette and brushes, spread a blue silk curtain over the window frame, turning the air in the room violet blue, drew a black wooden dice to a convenient place. The cabinet door opened, and Cesar had to stifle a cry. A dainty hand stopped her mouth. Another one covered her eyes. Let us keep our voices low. I entreat my readers to imagine I am whispering in their ears. But first let us see if Cesar's hand has remained over her eyes. Her breast had swollen so savagely from her heart-throbs that a button burst free from the tight corset of black velvet. Serves her right that she had buttoned it up. But how was she to know that her heart would play ill turns on her? She unbuttoned the corset, her snowy breasts wriggled free of their velvet prison, and she heaved a deep yet inaudible sigh. Then she returned her hand to her eyes to quiet the tumult within her soul, then lifted a finger, the little one, above her eyes, and peeped through the other fingers. She beheld a handsome head on a pair of white broad shoulders, on a bust seemingly carved in marble. It was the turn of the necklace to give her a warning, so she undid its clasps, and breathing the more composure, started to feast her eyes on that handsome model whose muscles and forms exuded pride and nobility. She let her hands drop to her sides, for her soul was exhausted with emotion, though her eyes were far from satiated. Yet she was still trembling like a leaf, and no one would have heard her teeth chatter if she had not been careful to keep her mouth closed tight. The painter's brush swept swiftly along the vacant space on the canvas with downward stroke, and Euronym's forms gained contours under the movements of his hand, curve by curve down to his shoulders, on which the painter sketched two long and glossy black wings. The sitting prolonged. Euronymous had been sitting up on the dais, straight and proud like an ancient Apollo, in the bluish semi-darkness of the room, which the painter had created purposefully to capture the basic tone of the figure. Euronymous! Francesco broke the silence reigning in the room. Cesara started at the sound. A discomfiting idea flashed through her mind, that the painter was going to draw the screen aside, and she would be found out, with untidy dress, disheveled hair, her eyes blazing in her head, her face scarlet. But the painter had other things on his mind. He said, I've come to the head. You must have been visited by doubts at least once in your life. Oblige me and recall that moment, that I may notice the expression on your face. Euronymous recalled to mind old Euthanasius's letter, and his lips parted slightly in a cold, skeptical smile. Oh, that he were turned to marble like that! The proud pain writ all over his face brought a tear into poor Cesara's eyes. Right, that's it, just what I need, exclaimed Francesco in a fit of inspiration. His eyes sparkled with exhilaration, and his brush hurried to catch the traits of painful bitterness on the face of his dark, infernal genius. How wretched he must have been if the mere memory is apt to change his expression so deeply, thought Cesara, and a tender, quiet affection suffused her soul. She was not her old self any longer. Her former trembling fit had subsided. She was in love with him now. She gathered that handsome white marble statue. That stone-still Adonis must have a soul. She felt like crying now. Her lips parted in a sweet expression of grief and love. She sank her head into the pillows and closed her eyes. She left her long stifled tears welling freely from her eyes. I could do with a few more sittings, said Francesco. Cesara opened her eyes, but Francesco had drawn the curtain, and she beheld her Adonis, this time in the clear sunlight. She covered her eyes again, and listened to the painter and Hieronyme repairing to the inner cabinet. She jumped out of the bed, and noiselessly and stealthily stole out of the studio, ran to her boudoir, threw herself on the bed, hid her face into the pillows, and started rumpling them in her hands. When Francesco entered her room, she fell on his neck, hugged him spasmodically, caressed and kissed him. What's the matter, my child? Nothing. You like him? She blurted out a few inarticulate words, her eyes shiny with tears and desire. Cesara to Hieronyme. Bear with a woman confessing her love for you, a pretty young woman, for I dare say I am pretty. Yet how could I know? You look so proud, and there is such a cool aloofness in your gaze. Oh, that my mouth could melt the ice on your eyes, my beloved. Wherefore should I conceal my love beneath the veil of prudery, when I love you so deeply that I would fain lower myself to become your servant, if you only would suffer my presence in a corner of your dwelling, and suffer me to cover with kisses the pillow whereupon your lay you lay your head for the nightly rest. Do you see what a submissive and humble child love can be? You might consider me now an impudent, wicked, and debased woman, yet rest assured that if you would deign to return my love, I should behave like a lamb and be silent as the grave while gazing at you in speechless bliss. How could I sound the depths of your heart? How? Come and tell me. What comes to who bears the name of Cesara? Hieronyme to Cesara. That you are pretty, I believe. That you love me, I am thankful. Your offering me everything you think that might bring me happiness urges me to lay down my life to your service. I humbly kiss your hand for your willingness to make me happy, albeit it is a delusion on your part that any woman's love could accomplish that. Love is a mishap, and all the happiness you offer is a sheer poison. You being unaware of it makes you the more adorable. If you were to look through my eyes for one moment, how different this world would seem. The world wherein you are seeking and hoping to find the one thing it cannot offer, happiness. You entreat me to return your love. If I could love you as I love a star in the sky, the answer would be aye. But if you expect me to start sighing and wishing, do I not hear all around the same vulgar sighs, the same yearnings, vulgar too? For what is their object? Sheer beastly pleasure, the reproduction within the earth's ant-hill of new generations of worms, nursing the same filthy lusts in their breasts, which they are wont to clad in the light of the moon and the shimmer of the lakes, and the same loathsome kisses, which they liken to the murmur of the zephyr and the delirium of the beech trees. A yea or nay? Behold the youths of our world, unbosoming their womanish feelings in trite smiles and equivocal whispers. Behold those women reciprocating with alluring winks and pursing of lips. Behold. All human life turns round and round this instinct, nourishment and reproduction, reproduction and nourishment. And would you have me fall so low, to beg for a kiss, to be at your beck and call, to start trembling at the sight of your naked bosom, the bosom that will be a corpse tomorrow, nay, that is essentially a corpse even today? Do you expect me to smarten myself up to your liking, to tell lies so as to divert your wayward mind, to turn into a puppet so as to whoever could be sure to what end? Nay, I will not be the foot of that plaque that rides the world. I take pity on you, on me, as I take pity on the whole world. I would sooner quell the fire in my heart and let it squander its sparks about, rather than allow it to kindle a feeling that I consider not only culpable but also vulgar. Let them take delight in their feelings. Let them love. Let their deaths be as sordid as their lives. I intend to keep myself like an exile, like a pariah, like a madman. Indifferent to their wags and wiles, the kernel of life is egotism and its rind of falsehood. I am neither an egotist nor a liar. Oft, when standing on a high cliff with the folds of my cloak thrown back over my shoulders, I feel I have turned into a bronze, and themselves share no feelings. Leave me to my pride and indifference. If the world were to be extinguished, and if it were up to me to save it with a lie, I would sooner let it die than let that lie pass my lips. Whereupon, would you have me climb down my pedestal and mix with people? I am only looking skyward, as is Apollo's statue. Be my heavenly star, cold and bright, and I shall let my eyes feast on you forever. Hieronymus had left monastery on Euthanasius's advice and lived by himself in the city in a little room that he had adorned with flowers and sketches by his own hand. In that hermitage he was often visited by Francesco. One day he showed him Cesara's letter. "Well, are you going to answer?" "This is my answer," he rejoined, showing his. "That's up to you, but come to my studio today, for the picture is finished." They left and arrived at Cesara's home. "The Lady Cesara," Francesco introduced her when they were inside. "Cesara?" murmured Hieronymus, taken back, and his gaze focused searchingly on the poor girl's shy and blushing face. Hieronymus sat in a corner of an ottoman in bad humor. Francesco walked out. Cesara knelt at the youth's feet with supplicating hands, her body trembling and her eyes on the verge of tears. "Oh," she whispered, as if afraid of her words, took his hand in hers and lifted it up to her lips. "Will you suffer, my love? Just that, suffer it, for I will not presume on you to return it, just to suffer yourself to be loved, as a child will. I have heard you hate women, and you cherish your solitude, but my love for you has driven me to despair." He reached an arm around her waist, raised her gently and sat her by his side, then cradled her nape in the palm of his hand and looked her straight in the eyes for an endless moment. It was so strange, he could hardly believe his eyes. "Was that straight from your heart?" he asked. She bowed her head. She had seen him smile, which was enough to put a chill on her hopes. "Alas," she said to herself, "what pleasure could such a man take in a shallow puppet and a mask of wax? Though any other man would feel flattered, but not he. He is not even flattered. He knows it is his due to be loved, and he is questioning me as a tutor would question his ward. Straight from your heart?" A woman of a disposition prouder of her beauty would have stalked out of the room, blue in the face with anger and deadly offended. No woman offers her love to be spurned, yet she was only sad. She would have cried her eyes out, but could not bring herself to show the slightest anger. In his turn, the more he gazed at her, the more beautiful he found her. He felt pity on her, yet did not wish to rouse idle hopes in her breast, as any other man would have done. "Far from me to say you are not beautiful, Cesara. Let us keep our voices low. I shall call you thou, for you have become dear to me. Though I do not love you in the way I wish I could, bear with me. I have never fallen in love, and perhaps I am not made for love. Yet there is one thing I want you to believe. I do not love any woman, but if I did, I should not have to look beyond you. I feel some kind of adoration deep in my heart, which might turn into love, if only you did not love me. I do not know how to put it into words, the strange feeling that cools my heart. I mean that makes it drowsy rather than cool. I have nursed no wishes, and you have taught me to do. You might think that strange, yet so do I. I might kiss you. If I were not afraid that you would return my kiss, I might love you when you sulk at me. I cannot feign to be any other," she said, "and that is a pity," she added in a lower voice, "for the happiness of my whole life depends on your love. This gives Castlemere a free hand. I have no excuse to oppose the wedding now that you will not have me. I have no wish to leave my father, for I can only try to forget my present misfortune by running into a greater misfortune. I am a woman. I deluded myself. I was beautiful. I think so no more. I thought I had right to spurn the love of a man who loved me, and now I am severely chastised with scorn for scorn. Cesara," he said in a low, compassionate voice, "will you let me fumble for an explanation? My heart and my mind are strange bedfellows. Nothing comes to them direct. An idea will linger on the surface of my mind for days on end. It will neither impress nor interest me in the least. It takes many a long day for it to creep into the back of my mind, and all of a sudden it grows deep roots among whatever other ideas it might find therein. Cesara, my feelings are no more responsive. Suppose I see a man dropping dead in the street. In that instant it cuts no ice with me. It takes hours for his image to loom large into my mind, and only then will burst out sobbing, and keep on sobbing for a long time as the mishap stays imprinted in my heart. You are begging for my mercy? It is I who needs your mercy, for if love were to seize my heart, I could die with love. You do not know what to make of me. This I feel, that once love takes hold of me, death will follow suit. The one available feeling I have is compassion, and it is all yours. Love me if you will, Suffer me to utter this sweet word, if you are so merciful as to will it. Do you imagine I am beyond loving you? You are mistaken. Grant me time enough so that your icon can reach the recesses of my heart, so that I might come to terms with the idea, for up to now I have never known what loving or being loved means. And I believe there may come a time when I shall go mad with love for you. He kissed her brow and walked out. She smiled. She picked up a pack of cards, shuffled them to find out if he would come again on the morrow, and whispered quietly, while she was alighting them, "Should he come tomorrow, I will love him. Should he not, then, well, then I will love him. Should he not, then, well, then I will love him no less." Hieronyme to Euthanasius. My fancy plays with a maid's visage in its own peculiar way, which is to say I scrawl in an album the various expressions of one visage. It is strange that my eyes, for all their limpidity, if I may say so, should not be able to perceive a phenomenon at the moment it occurs. I keep scrawling the walls. I have made the acquaintance of a maid who loves me, though I do not love her myself. I saw her face scarlet, bashful, excited. I have rendered that expression in my sketch-book. She knelt at my feet, and begged me to suffer her love. I cannot put into words the look of innocence, candor, and love on her face, but I have sketched it. My sketch is words kissing. It may be one of the best I have done yet. I have put it by my beside. Discomfiture and sweet resignation, an angelic profile. I vouchsafe her a few kind words, a gleam of hope in the maid's amorous sorrow, an adorable sketch, yet I can tell my sketches are taking a heavier toll on my heart. I love her not. Nay, farewell, father. You are in love with her, my son, though you know it not. Sinis et umbra sumus, Euthanasius. There are people whom quick-witted men and all women can size up at a glance, men of little wit, yet of hearty, resolute, unyielding character. Such was Castlemare. Should a woman hear him pulling the bell-cord, her face would assume the proper expression of welcome. Should a good actor hear his stern footsteps resounding steadily and severely along the galleries and corridors of the Bianchi Palace, it would be an easy task for him to imagine the man's character by mere hindsight, a nature common, unyielding, and firm. Having set his mind on prevailing over Sisara by hook or crook, all means seemed welcome to him, though the means he could devise were scanty due to the scantiness of his own wits. Yet he had enough brains to try to find out whether the wily girl had a lover. Albeit Hieronyme could not define his feelings for Sisara. He enjoyed obeying her as a child would obey an elder sister, and if truth be told, she took an unpardonable advantage of her power over him. In her presence he felt an unexplainable tenderness creeping into his heart, a meaningless thrill of pleasure, the memory of which would stay with him for days on end. It could not have been love, for though her presence made him happy, he was even happier when thinking of her in her absence. During such spells of retrospection in which he could toy with her image, her bodily presence was cumbersome, to say the least. He would feel nervous in her company, no chance to give free rein to his dreams, an occupation which was the raison d'etre of his life and the only happiness a self-contained character, keeping himself beyond love and hate, could relish. If she would leave me alone, he said to himself, thing would be not half so bad. I would hold her dainty hand in mine, both would gaze at the moon, the virginal moon, or I would gaze at her as if she were a marble statue or a portrait painted in a book of icons against a luminous background. Her hair is as soft as a spume of gold, and a singular luminescence upon her face. But she would not allow me a moment's rest, always strangling me or kissing me, and letting me know I love her. Love her, indeed, otherwise. She is downright beautiful, that much I must concede. Her chin rounds off like a golden apple. At time her mouth takes the shape of a cherry, and the eyes, oh, her eyes! I wish you would not draw them so nigh to mine. When her lashes touch mine, my body is all pins and needles down to my toes. For all her beauty, a mist blurs my sight. I would fain kill her at such moments. She turns my life into an ordeal. Yet the poor girl, in all fairness, little does she know she torments me. Now he was strolling about the garden of the Bianchi Palace. His dry black hair framed his tired handsome face of Paris marble with the wings of a wild eagle. His half-closed eyelids showed off the largeness of his demonic yet curving neck, as actuated with the pride seemingly left intact by life's burden. The night was translucent and the air snowed over with life's burden. The night was translucent and the air snowed over with moonbeams, creeping through the trees' benighted leafage. He sat on a bench. He looked his locked hands resting on his knees and his hair streaming down over his bent brow, immersed in a train of disconnected ideas, while the moon sailing among clouds was turning the night into a dreamland. He heard a quiet swish and started awake. It was she. How she had changed! Her face was no longer haggard but rounded off. Her breasts were plumper. The blush over her cheeks had vanished in favor of a pallor that lent her an air of undefinable tenderness. There was no trace left about her eyes of the former savage tenebrous lustre beneath which she had flashed her dark love and equally dark desire. Now they were so limpid and unfathomably deep, they invited the gaze to feast on them for whole days. Quiet and melancholy peace reigned over her depth, and in that rounded yet sad pale face her purple mouth curved into a dreamy smile, a rose of Jericho of unfading beauty. She was approaching along the walks, bathed in the night's clear air, along the white paths dappled with the shadows of the leafy meshes. She noticed him, but her pace would not quicken. Had she divined his character? Possibly. He sat still with watchful eyes, while she was drawing nearer at a slow pace, like a lunatic or a sleepwalker. He rested an elbow against the back of the bench, buried his chin into his palm, his fingers gently stroking his cheek, and let his bright eyes gaze into wonder at her approaching glowing visage. She sat by his side, between him and the moon. She did not as much touch his hand, just sat still. The moon rendered her contours even more graceful, and she was wily enough to contrive her whole body be bathed by the sweet voluptuous light. He kept gazing at her. Then he slowly reached for her cold, dainty hand. Oh, he thought, and funny thrill ran through his heart. Oh, I really like her now. And with a gentle movement he pressed his cheek against hers, his mouth fumbling for her ear, and whispered in a soft yet ardent voice, Behold the moon, this midnight moon, beauteous like a fortnight-old baby, and so cold. Feel you not that all life's sorrows, every wish, and every aspiration have ceased, while gazing at this resplendent picture that you enrich? My mind's eye beholds an angel now, beauteous as you have never looked to me before, and sweet. See you not that I am in love with you? A thrill ran through her body, yet she gave no answer. And gaze at the whole city, this rich blend of palaces and domes, and see how the spires in the city and the ship's sails along the river glitter in the moonlight above the benighted dwellings. Within the center of the picture is you, you, you. There is no sound of the air except a nightingale trilling in that remote garden and far-off muffled rumble of a mill-wheel. And you are gazing down in silence and innocence upon this world. Roses bloom on your face, you, queen over all souls. Are you not chaste like the spring water, willowy like the cypress, sweet-voiced like the nightingale herself, youthful like the full moon, childish like a canary, worshipped like a goddess? Behold, he continued in an even lower voice, the dark narrow street in one corner only does a streak of light pierce its shadow, yet the spot looks like a covered curtain at the window, and gaze at the sky all night long. Oh, I love you, he exclaimed with finality, I love you. The film over my eyes had vanished, and I can see that I love you. He hugged her so ardently that their bodies were entwined in a long, vigorous embrace. Then, exhausted by his newly born feeling, he leaned his body against the back of the bench, closed his eyes, and tilted his head backward. Sisara stood over his moon-bathed face, put her supporting hands on the bench, leaned over him, half closed her eyes, and covered his face with countless kisses. He was past feeling anything, like a child overcome with sleep, abandoning himself to his mother's caresses. She heard a rustle among the leaves of a thicket. Goodness me, she thought in fright. What if somebody has spying on me? It might have been Castlemare himself, poor boy. However, he is to return home safe? That man could lie in wait for him. She allowed him a minute to sober up, then asked him gently, loath to intrude on his thoughts and his lifelike dreams, Are you any good with a sword? Aye, he said. I'll fetch you a blade, shall I? Aye, for a kiss, aye. She hurried off into the palace and was back in a couple of minutes with a sword. She girded the belt round his waist and was not missing the opportunity of another embrace. My sweet ice-floe, you block of marble, you stone, you. Leave me alone, Sisara, I feel like dying. Nay, my angel, go home, take good care nothing befalls you on the way. Think of your Sisara, my own Jim. She could not forbear taking his head in her hands and giving him one more kiss, a passionate and noisy one. Go now, go, I beg you. Why beg me? I could kill if you lingered here. How? Don't I know how? She said, wily as a child. She walked him to a thicket and pushed him out of the garden. Then she turned back, threw her arms round a tree trunk, and unbosomed her thwarted desires. Year on them, I'll bite you now. She smote her first against the trunk, then repaired to her room, tore off her velvet corset, tousled her golden hair in a frenzy, and looked in the mirror at her tear-stained eyes and quivering lips. Then she herself onto the bed in a sobbing fit and started whispering in an almost inaudible voice sweet words, exceedingly sweet and endearing. One name came out loud and clear through her moans: Yeronim. It was not so easy for Yeronim. He was approaching a narrow street, the night's bracing air had sobered him, and being of a less sensual disposition than that of a sweetheart, only a theoretical conviction that he was in love with her had remained in his mind. He walked on the dark street, his springy step bespeaking, as it were, an elastic weight, his gait resembling the canter of a thoroughbred, and he heard the thuds of soldierly rigid and regular footsteps following him. He recognized them as belonging to Castlemare. He stopped short and turned toward the noise. Castlemare caught up with him. A hushed silence. Hieronym stuck his blade point against the granite wall, and the sparks enabled the rivals to recognize each other. Without wasting words, they crossed swords. Then a groan was heard, a heavy thud on the rough pavement. One of the two shadows vanished into a house close by. The others lay there speechless. Hieronym had drawn aside the curtain and was now lying on his bed, looking out of the window at the setting moon sinking into the river and turning its surface into a luminescent, smooth road. Then he heard the sound of the cautious rapping at the door. He got out of bed and answered. It was the painter. "Young man," the latter urged, "you will have to flee the city post. Haste." "Why?" "You have killed Castlemare." "I know as much." "You know as much. But what do you not seem to know is that he is the grandson and sole heir of the city's podesta, and also that dueling is outlawed, and you may hang for it." "So what?" "So what, Hierona, my son? However have you come into this manner of speaking?" the old man added placatingly. "It would be a pity to lose such a good-looking head. Besides, there is one more thing to consider. Here it is." He handed him a sheet of paper scrawled with slanting lines. The youth unfolded it. "See Sarah to Hieronym. Run away, please. You have not killed Castlemare." Choking with blood, he ordered his men to carry him here. He has divulged the whole story, including the man to whom he owes this wound. Run away, please. They might come for you before the night is out. What is worse, the Count will affiance me, regardless of his plight, and I am powerless to refuse. Yet I love you. Rest assured I shall not outlive my misfortune. Your lingering here, far from saving me, would only make me die with worry. My hawk. Run away, and perhaps woe is me. Where is the straw I could grab at? I am of two minds about what to write, how I would write. Come to me, but my heart will not let me. Consider, should I destroy you only to behold you once more? Nay, run away, Yeronim. Some chance event might still make me yours. The Count might die. How I wish he would. I love you. Nay, nay, I will not have you think I love you so much as to bid you to stay. Farewell, my beloved Cesar. Hieronym threw a cloak over his shoulders, and they walked to the river bank, where Francesco let him have his own boat. He embraced his aged friend, unfastened the boat, stepped into it, and sailed downstream to the shiny expanse of the sea. Once beyond the waterfront, he threw the helm of the oars into the water, lay back on the bottom of the boat, his face upturned toward the star-studded grandeur of the sky. A mere speck adrift to the boundless water, he fell fast asleep. On the morrow, when he opened his eyes, the sun was high in the sky, and his boat had been stranded on a rocky outcrop. The sun, the heavenly lord, caressed the bosom of the sea with fingers of light. On the shore of the main, he saw an old convent rising from among the wooded rocks, with a cloister lined the colonnades of grey stone, along which the nuns were taking the air at slow and regular pace. A garden rolled down from beneath the walls to the shore of the undulating sea, which reached its waves toward a grove of cypress and rose bushes sheltered among the rocks in a declivity, sloping down to a secluded bathing place. He took off his shoes and set to exploring his rocky kingdom, leaping from boulder to boulder. He came across a swift brook running noisily toward the bottom of a cave. He followed it into the cave. A bracing coolness welcomed him after his sun-scorched sleep. On and on he went, but the cave was longer and darker than he had expected. Presently he spied a speck of blue light, but he brushed the thought aside for one of his imaginings. Yet the light did not vanish, and he went down deeper and discovered a hole no larger than his hand. It must lead somewhere. He peeped through it, and saw large thickets and smelt a sleep-inducing fragrance of herbs. He strove to enlarge the hole with his bare hands, but it was a granite wall, and his exertions were of no avail, yet it seemed to him a big boulder had given it a little. He pushed it hard. The boulder turned as if set in hinges, and disclosed a narrow passage which he could negotiate by crawling on all fours. He squeezed through quickly, pushed it back into place, covered the hole with stones and dirt, and on turning his head to take a look at the place he had entered, he was stunned with the beauty of the landscape. Gigantic grey rocks were piled up sky-high to all sides, and a vale sloped down in their midst, a garden vale furrowed by springs subsiding into a lake, crowned with an islet, on which he saw an apiary with long rows of beehives. Euthanasius's island! He thought in amazement, and each step he put forward held a new wonder in store for him. The insects themselves were tame in this garden of Eden. Inquisitive blue, gold-speckled or red-winged butterflies alighted on his long black hair so his head looked like a strewn with flowers. The island air was suffused with the festive buzz of honeybees, bumblebees, and butterflies. The grass grew chest-high, and the vetch trapped his legs in loops of flowers. A voluptuous warmth and fragrance pervaded the garden. He walked to the lake and waded its water to the islet. Buzzing bees kept hovering over the youthful new emperor of their paradise. He looked around for the cave he knew must be here on the islet. He found it true to the fact. Carved into a wall of rock, saw the chisel and other sundry tools, the bedstead, a jug of water, yet there was no trace of the old man. A written sheet of paper lay on a low table. I feel my marrow turning to dust, my slow-moving blood is thin as water and cold as ice. My dimmed eyes can but painstakingly discern the world without. I am passing away, and of me only the earthen brazier will remain wherein that creepers and waters flowers might gird my body in their verdure, and entwine my hair and beard with their stalks, and in my palms turn up toward that eternal fountainhead of life which you call the sun. May a swarm of wasps build the combs of their waxen citadel. May the running brook dissolve my body into its eternally fresh water, and merge me with the bosom of nature. May it save me from my putrefaction. Thus my dead body will stay for long years beneath the swift running torrent, like a fairy king of yore, in centuries long slumber in a bewitched island. Euronon swept his glance along the walls embossed with love scenes, noticed the old manuscripts and stacks of sun-dried writings on the shelves of a case lining one of the walls, then smelled the water in the pitcher, and seeing it was flat and foul, concluded the old man must have passed away. Thus he, the heir apparent to this peaceful shrine, to this garden walled in like a cell, felt at liberty to thumb the books whose pages were worth their weight in gold, and promising of many an hour of spiritual delectation. Then he passed on to the old man's writings, wherein each and every reflection was a stamp of that profound and blissful mind, their impact so powerful that every sentence roused an endless trade of thoughts and analogies in the youth's brain. Before long he familiarized himself with his tiny kingdom and felt at home in it, and made busy tending the garden beds and the beehives, stalking like a buccaneer among the islets, thickets, and grasses. Often on a warm night he would lie naked on the lakeside, tucked in a flimsy sheet of linen cloth, listening to the sweet sounds of nature, the gurgling of the white-foamed springs, the rumble of the sea, the grandeur of the night, all concurred in lulling him into a blissful sound sleep, wherein he went on living like a plant beyond dreams, beyond desires. On the day when the wedding of Cesare and Castlemare was to be celebrated, her father, the Marquis Bianchi, died of an apoplectic fit in the company of his boon companions, and amid the clinking of glasses. When she beheld him lying in state, the lids still open above his glassy eyes, foam still trickling down the corners of his mouth, she leaned against the architrave of a window, and cast a look of disgust at the corpse who had known no goal in life other than the gratification of his own desires, and who, in order to continue living free rein to his passions, had contemplated selling his daughter, an icon of the Madonna, to the man she hated most bitterly in the world. Castlemare put in an appearance and started consoling her. "Countess," he said, "now that your sire has passed away, you will find comfort and support in me, your pledged husband." "That's a cold consolation," she rejoined, "for you have ceased to be my pledged husband. At least my year of mourning has procrastinated that blessed prospect. Will you kindly spare me your presence before the year is up?" Castlemare stalked out, disgruntled, turning a wolfish glare upon her. Francesco advised her to leave the city wherein she could be importuned with the tempers of her cruel admirer, to retire to a nunnery at a few hours' distance, which advice she followed readily after her father's obsequies. Obsequies. The poor child had grown thin with grief. The only news she had of Hieronym was that Francesco's boat, which he had sailed out to sea, had been found shattered to pieces on the sea-front, so the thought he had drowned had been dead for a long time. Within the quiet monastery walls she regained her composure. The window of the cell assigned to her overlooked the garden and the stair, for long and oft she would bolt the door to be free of intrusions, and stare for long hours at the myriads of waves vanishing in the offing, at the blooming wilderness of the rolling garden which reached its tangle of thickets and trees to the shoreline, or at other times she would lose herself along the shadowy walks, weeding the grasses that invaded the footpaths, or would take shelter beneath some thicket by the shore, heedless of the hours passing by, prey to her hopeless yearning. On a warm day she would take off her clothes, leave them beneath some thicket, and walk down to the door, an exquisite figure, a snowy apparition whereupon the youthful delicacy and softness of girlhood enhanced the noble, ripe, suave and well-curved beauty of the woman. The violet-blue veins showed through the general transparency of her smooth skin, and as her feet wadded through the water, abandoning her body to its mellowing embrace, her smile regained the wayward unruliness of childhood, struggling against the time-old ocean. She feels even younger than her years. The smile of her closed lips exudes vitality, and her body yields to the boisterous embrace of the ocean, her white arms slicing the blue waves, swimming on her side or with backstrokes, or just lounging voluptuously on the bed of waves. The light merged into dusk, and she resumed her love affair with the sea, smiling at the approaching waves with intense and sweet voluptuousness. She bared her snowy throat, and let her hair stream down over her round shoulders and her love-swollen breasts, and stood naked and beauteous like and a worn, sweet and smooth skin whereon the mere touch would have left the marks of bruises. She dived into the sea, her mind on reaching a group of cliffs about a quarter of an hour's swimming distance. The submissive waves carried her away, and before long she reached the cliffs. She walked carefully along the bluff, leaning her hands against the rocky wall, and came across a cave, where from a glittery spring was flowing out along a rocky bed. She entered the cave, keeping to the brook, and all of a sudden a heavenly panorama opened wide before her eyes. My God, what a paradise, she thought. I will rest here for a little while. She walked on through the warm, sweet-smelling grasses, which tickled her skin, dived into the crystal-clear lake, whose water made her slumberous, then ran through the orange grove by a swarm of butterflies and bees. She was frolicsome like a child wandering about a bewitched fairyland. At long last, noticing the sun had skirted the horizon, she tried to retrace her steps, but to her consternation she could see no way out. What was she to do? Thinking she had lost her way, she swept her glance all about her. Still no way out. Oh, she thought, what if I spent one night in this earthly paradise? Not a soul around to pry or chide me for it. Night had closed in. Large white stars were twinkling, and the moon's silver shield was sailing across the sky, tearing through the waves of translucent rolling clouds. Sheaves of blooming flowers intoxicated the warm night air. The hills shimmered beneath a veil of mist. The quiet water girding the grove was glazed white, and every now and then it washed the slumberous lakeside with trembling waves. And in the midst of this benighted fairyland, encircled by the sea, Sisara sauntered like a snowy apparition, her long fair hair streaming down to her heels. She walked at a slow pace. All the dreams and charms of the fragrant summer night suffused her virginal soul. She could have cried. The figure of her beloved loomed large in her mind's eye, and she felt as Eve must have felt in paradise, alone with her sorrow. She drew nigh to the lake and descried a footpath beneath the water. Drew nigh to the lake and descried a footpath beneath the water. She set to pacing it. That was doubled. I don't know why. She set to pacing it, and the water whirled around her ankles. She held her gaze on the charming grove. A yearning for happiness took possession of her bosom. She thirsted for love like an unripe youthful girl. Her lips were parched with pining for a kiss, her thoughts impassioned like a bed of flowers drooping in the draught. When she reached the grove, the scented shadow of the tall trees flooded her skin with their blue reflection, and she looked like a marble statue against the violent blue light. She started at descrying the figure of a man among the trees. She thought it must be one of her imaginings taking shape against the leafy meshes, yet the figure took on sharper outlines. It was he. Alas, she thought with a smile, how foolish of me! I see him wherever I may turn my eyes. In the beauty of the night, in the hush of the groves, he came nearer. He likewise thought an embodied imagining was standing before his eyes. He stared at her. They stared at each other. He took her hand in his, and she unbosomed a stifled cry. Sisara, he cried, embracing her in his arms. Sisara, are you an apparition, a dream? A shadow the night has painted with the moonlight snow? Is it you, really you? She was sobbing, and no word of answer would pass her lips. She thought she had gone mad. She thought it was all a dream, and how she wished her dream would last forever and ever. Is it you, really you? She asked in a strangled voice, for her mind was sober again, and all resplendent dreams were crowding it, eager to come true. She neither could nor would tear her gaze off of him, heedless of her nakedness. Translated by Ion Georgia, edited by A.K. Brockel. And that's actually the end of Poems and Prose of Mihai Eminescu. Thank you for listening. Even that one reminded me so much of so many other things that have, I'm sure, probably were inspired by those poems. But to me, that's so exciting when you're reading something and you realize um, that there's that sort of connection there between the original work um, and something else. So much of it's just like so strikingly beautiful. I feel like even when there are things that are described that are very graphically violent or very tragic, there's still a kind of there's still a sort of beauty to the details of it, even though it's like sometimes it can be like really upsetting things, but it's like the way it's described though, it's just like still just so beautiful, even though it can at times be so impassioned and dark. Although I feel like that's the way all the poems were and all the stories. They're all very so um, full of passion. Anyway, thank you for listening. I enjoyed reading. Some parts of it I enjoyed reading than other parts. Um, so thank you anyway for listening. I don't know what I'm going to read next out loud. This is actually a decent time to take a break, actually, for now. So thank you. Goodbye for now. I'll figure out whatever I read next in the meantime.